Hello and good evening, everybody, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the 16th episode of Album Rant. And I thought it would be a very good idea to kind of pick up where we left off last time and kind of complete our journey through time in terms of Pink Floyd. And what I like to focus on tonight is their 10th, I believe it's their 10th. Yes, it's their 10th studio release entitled Animals, released in 1977. But before we get to that, let me just kind of fill in a few blanks, if I will. Anyways, after the Metal album, I gotta say, Pink Floyd's success really took off. The next thing they did was in 1972, they released yet another soundtrack to another film, some French film that I have never even heard of. But the album was entitled Obscured by Clouds, and I really liked it. Not my favorite, definitely not their best, but I really enjoyed it. Then they hit gold the following year in 1973. They released their big magnum opus entitled Dark Side of the Moon. And fanatics out there, especially college students, will write essays as they're sitting around little circles in Indian style in their little hippie circles, smoking weed or whatever, and they will talk about how much Dark Side of the Moon is the greatest thing ever created. And I'm not going to lie, it is really good. Maybe not the greatest thing ever created, but I really love it. And it had hits such as Speak to Me, Time, Money, Us and Them, Brain Damage. And it had some of the greatest Pink Floyd songs ever recorded, and I cannot recommend Dark Side of the Moon enough. But then the big question was, could they follow up on the success of Dark Side of the Moon? Could they replicate the influence that they've had on this genre in their following release? And the answer is absolutely yes. As they released Wish You Were Here 2 years later in 1975, and it had hits such as Shine On You Crazy Diamond, which is definitely an exercise in excess, but it was really great. The entire thing, parts 1 through 9, added to a total of 25 minutes. Boy, that is ridiculous. It also had the title track, which is one of the greatest acoustic ballads ever. It had Welcome to the Machine and Have a Cigar. So now, Pink Floyd had a lot of pressure on them in terms of what they would do after Wish You Were Here, and that brings us to the subject of tonight's review entitled Animals, which was the following release. And you can see right here we have the cover, and the animals, I have got to say, are very metaphorical. I've done some research, and apparently this album is a concept album. Now, I'm not sure if you know what a concept album is, but I'll go ahead and tell you. A concept album is an album by a musical artist where every single track has some kind of unifying theme. Sometimes it tells a story. King Diamond is the master of this. Sometimes it just takes you through different moods and different phases, and every song is bound together, like I said, by a unifying theme. And Alice Cooper is the master of this. Well, Pink Floyd also had a lot of success with it. So let's go ahead and see what we have right here. But anyways, the unifying concept on this album is basically the social structure and different social and socioeconomic classes, and how that different social structure divides us and basically causes rift between people because of just of who they are. Apparently that's what it's about. If you think it's about something different, feel free to correct me, but that's what I'm going with. So let's go ahead and take a look here on the insert. We have some artwork right here, and then we have the record inside this little compartment right there. And you can see we have the track list and we have lyrics, and so that's all fine and good. But this album is made up of 5 different tracks, and they are also shown on here on the back cover. And once again, the lineup is the lineup on this album is the same as it was on the previous, the previous 7 albums, I guess. Yeah, they've had this lineup for a while. They had it through the Film More soundtrack, Uma Guma, Adam Hart Mother, Metal, Obscured by Clouds, Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here. Yep, they've had this lineup. This is the 8th album they've had that lineup on, so yeah, it's pretty impressive. But once again, it is David Gilmour on lead vocals and guitar. It is Roger Waters on lead vocals and bass guitar. It is Nick Mason on the drums and Richard Wright on the keyboards and lead vocals some of the time. But anyways, let's take a look at side one. Side one is composed of 2 songs. The first one is called Pigs on the Wing Part 1. And it's only about a minute 25 seconds or so. It's very, very short, but it was written exclusively by Roger Waters, and it was also sung by Roger Waters. And apparently there was, it was supposed to be longer than this. Apparently some of David Gilmour's guitar work got lost somehow, and the empty spaces were filled in by another guitarist. I can't remember his name, but I'm sure someone will correct me. But anyways, apparently the version that we hear on the 8-track was not the version they intended due to David Gilmour's lost guitar work, but I think the vinyl and the CD fill in the empty gaps. But Pigs on the Wing Part 1 and Pigs on the Wing Part 2, actually, are apparently a 2-part suite dealing with some kind of relationship, some kind of love relationship that Roger Waters had. I'm not too fully sure about that, so feel free to correct me. But anyways, Pigs on the Wing Part 1 is only about a minute and a half or so. But then we come to Dogs. Dogs is over 17 minutes, and it composes over 90% of side 1. I am not joking. And Dogs is absolutely incredible. Dogs is primarily sung by David Gilmour. It is actually the only song on this album that David Gilmour sings. Roger Waters, I believe, sings the first half, and David Gilmour sings the second half. But it starts out very acoustically, and it's fading in, and it fades in. It starts out very quiet, then it gets louder and louder and louder. David Gilmour kicks in with the lead vocals, and it just starts exploding. It becomes very fast and very bombastic, and it is absolutely amazing in my opinion. It then goes through kind of a bluesy section, and then a very soft section where once again, it's kind of like they've kind of descended into a pit of darkness or something. But then for the third verse, it just picks back up and resumes the rhythm that we had on the previous 2 verses, and it closes out very, very nicely. I know that the title is metaphorical somehow. I am not exactly sure what the dogs represent. I think that represents the working class. I could be very much mistaken, but again, feel free to correct me. But I absolutely do recommend Dogs. Dogs is one of the greatest Pink Floyd songs ever. Okay? It is, like I said, 17 minutes. It's multi-section. It has all these different movements within it. And I think Dogs is an absolute classic, and it is definitely my favorite from side 1. Now we come to side 2, and the very first track is called Pigs, 3 different ones, and this one was sung and written exclusively by Roger Waters. And I have read up on this, and I believe the pigs represent the upper class, the 1%, I guess you would call it, who are basically just feeding off the hard work and sweat of the people below them, the people less powerful than them. And to be honest, I don't think Pigs is quite as good as Dogs. Pigs is a little bit more bluesier. It's still very progressive in nature. Dogs is definitely a prog rock masterpiece, but Pigs is a little bit bluesier, and it's got kind of a different beat and rhythm to it, but it's still good no matter what. And kind of a funny story about this. One time I was in the car on a very, very long road trip, and myself and someone else, we were taking turns driving, and when I was driving, I put animals in, actually. And then we stopped to switch spaces, and the person who took over driving never took the album out of the CD player, and we just kept hearing this album over and over and over again for like 4 hours or so. But anyways, Pigs, 3 different ones is the song that really got in my head during that excursion. And like I said, there definitely could be worse things in your head, but that got a little bit annoying, but Pigs 3 Different Ones is a great song, but nowhere near as good as what comes after it. Sheep, again, sung and written exclusively by Roger Waters. Sheep is the big magnum opus on this album, and I, again, absolutely love this. It starts out with a nice little keyboard intro, and you hear some barnyard animals in the background, but then when the beat starts kicking in, it is very, very fast, and it's got a nice rhythm and a nice beat to it, and Roger Waters is on his A game here. This may be him at his very, very best. Again, we have kind of a slow section in the middle. This thing is over 10 minutes, so it can't do the same thing all the time. It's got a very slow section in it, and Richard Wright does some very good keyboard work in the middle, but then it picks right back up for the third verse, and the outro to this song, that little beat at the very end where it basically starts fading out, that outro is one of the greatest outros I have ever heard. Stargazer by Rainbow may have this beat, but again, Sheep is top-notch, one of my favorite Pink Floyd songs of all time. And Sheep is definitely my favorite song from side 2. But then we have Pigs on the Wing Part 2, and it actually sounds identical to Part 1, but I think the lyrics are a little bit different. But again, I think Roger Waters is the only member who plays on Pigs on the Wing Part 1 and 2. All that there is singing and acoustic guitar work, and it's a good acoustic song for what it is, but it just does not measure up to the brilliance of the 3 songs in the middle. Dogs, Pigs, 3 Different Ones, and Sheep is really where the brilliance of Pink Floyd really comes together. And for that, I absolutely do recommend this album. Dogs is my favorite from side 1, Sheep is my favorite from side 2, and I think Sheep is my favorite from the entire album. This was recorded during a time where Roger Waters was kind of starting to take over the band. In the mid-70s, the early to mid-70s, I would really say that David Gilmour was in full front. He was really the one who was kind of the front man of the band. But now Roger Waters is really starting to take precedent. And this would segue over into what came after this, which is considered to be one of the greatest concept albums ever, which I may talk about on another episode, maybe. It's called The Wall, by the way. I'm sure you've heard of it. Anyways, next week, what I want to do is I want to take a deep dive into another album ranking. My first one seemed to go very well, so we'll see how this one does. But until then, have a very pleasant evening.